let's overreact to some running backs and some crazy chaos carousel that is the running back position and landscape in free agency. So, starting off, my birds, Saquon Barkley goes there to the Eagles on a 3-year deal, basically 12 per, could even be as high as almost in excess of 15 per, depending on certain incentives. I think that'll become clear later on as we see official details, as really as we get into the season, I believe it'll become a lot clearer. But with Saquon Barkley, man, I love this. And I know you can yell at me for some bias, scream at me in the comments for it, but you're looking at a guy who really is getting his type of Christian McCaffrey move, going from an incompetent situation, a not so great dynasty, not so great fantasy situation, to an incredible opportunity floor, opportunity ceiling that is the Philadelphia Eagles in his case. Okay. And I want to be clear. Because he is in a situation that has a Jalen Hurts, that has an A.J. Brown, that has a Devontae Smith, that has a Dallas Goedert, it does, in a way, take a load off of him in terms of the attention, so to speak. Defenses have to be more disciplined than they were against him in New York, right? With the Giants, I think it's a giant leap for Saquon's dynasty value. Really bad pun there. Seriously, you look at RB10 in and around that range for where Saquon has kind of been trended in terms of the dynasty landscape. I see an 85% of CMC ceiling, and so that translates to 20 points per game in PPR formats. That is a difference maker at the position, okay? And we're talking a guy that's 27 versus CMC's 28 years old, right? And I know CMC is his own unique player, but Saquon Barkley has not 1 year, I'm comfortable saying that, not 1 year of high end production in his range of outcomes, in the range of outcome that I am buying into and of the belief, okay? And so you look at, he's behind guys like Etienne, Williams, A-Chain, Jonathan Taylor. I think he has to be right in that conversation. If you want to view it as one tier, so to speak, he's right at the top of that quote unquote tier now for me. I mean, it's right behind the three horsemen of a Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Brees Hall, the young guns, right? And then a CMC, of course. He really has to start to factor in right there. And I look at, shout out to Dynasty Domain, hanging out there, their live stream, startup draft, startup mock draft, so to speak. I mean, going over 2 rounds, upwards of 3 rounds, 24, 36 picks behind a Christian McCaffrey who goes in, the end of the second, beginning of the third round in startup drafts. That's crazy to me. That's asinine in a way. It is insane to think there is that much of a delta that should be recognized between those two players. I'm of that belief. So, especially if you're one of those contender type teams and he snakes back to you, and you're looking at, at the end of the second round, third round, why pay for that type of premium running back production for a guy that's not getting any younger, approaching 20, 28, 29, 30, when you can, at this point, wait a couple rounds and get this type of player in Saquon Barkley. So I'm loving this move, obviously, for Saquon Barkley and what it means for his dynasty value moving forward. Let me know how much you guys agree or disagree with that in the comments. As you might with Josh Jacobs now, from Vegas to the Raiders, from the Vegas Raiders, to the Packers, in a 4-year, $48 million deal, which is a hefty price, but it's almost inflated. It's a little bit misleading because it's only really the first year guaranteed in that contract. Really interesting structure. But I ultimately I see Josh Jacobs having a productive year there. Another great change of scenery for him. And I see a player that is valued, right outside, almost right with Saquon Barkley, which I don't necessarily agree with. Shout out in that same startup mocks, I'm seeing literally pick one pick after the other. And so I'm not saying there's a huge delta between a Saquon and a Josh Jacobs, but I think there's, half a round, upwards of a round difference, I think, in my rankings personally. I mean, yeah, I view Saquon Barkley as, a fourth round startup pick. I view Josh Jacobs, firmly as a fifth round startup pick. So it's nothing too crazy. I mean, I love Josh Jacobs and what this means for his dynasty value. I just don't see how, you can recognize him as the same comparison I just made for Saquon. I don't see necessarily that huge, 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 huge upside. Although it's a very empty backfield in Green Bay. Just the underlying numbers. I mean, Josh Jacobs, not a great year last year, right? And interestingly enough, I mean, it's for running backs. You think about this game; it is a dangerous game where you can't really rely on insane production carrying over from one year to the next. I mean, look at the ups and downs, how cyclical it is. A player like Jonathan Taylor, right? But so just some interesting context there with Josh Jacobs, but I think he still gets just insane amount of opportunities, and I like him as a guy that's right in that kind of RB 10 through 12, a back end RB1 in Dynasty. I think it's very safe to say that. So I love this move for Josh Jacobs. Derrick Henry to the Ravens. Hoped it was going to happen at the trade deadline, right? That would have been awesome. But on a guy that's at 30 right now on that wrong side, he is going to have an insane 2024. I think that's not going out on a limb whatsoever. Love me some Derrick Henry. If you're a contender, this is the type of guy I'm looking. If you're trying to go all in, if there's a player to really kind of cement that status, I think it's Derrick Henry, man. Derrick Henry, that how great that offense is. You got Lamar Jackson, you got Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Todd Monken, kind of steering that ship there. Really love this move, obviously, for Derrick Henry. Incredible, incredible landing spot and a total difference maker at the position in that backfield than what we've seen with the Justice Hills, the J.K. Dobbins, the Gus Edwards of the world. So really, really good 2024, I think, lies ahead. Maybe a 2025 as well. So where do you value that? This is, the $1 million question. And I see he's basically a fringe kind of in that sentiment now of a top 20 running back in Dynasty, which I can understand. Nothing too high, too less than that. You're looking at a guy that is capable of being a top 5 producer, but if we're playing a dynasty game, that could be for just one more season, right? Or maybe 2 years max. We'll see. I don't see him having a second contract with the Ravens, right? I don't see him being re-signed there when he's aged, 33, 34. So if you're a contender, awesome, hold on to him. If you're looking to contend, a great, I think, player to buy at a reasonable price. Okay. I'm not looking to pay anything, nothing to the extent of a mid first round pick, right? I'm not, maybe a late 111, 112 type of first I would entertain if I earn that, and that's the state of my roster and just what the impact Derrick Henry can have on my team compared to taking a flyer on wide receiver 7 or RB1 or 2 of this class, right? So DeAndre Swift to Chicago, going for my Eagles. And look, I'm seeing DeAndre Swift valued in and around RB15, significantly higher than a Derrick Henry. And I know Swift is a lot younger and he's got a 3-year, $24 million deal, but I don't know if the grass is quote unquote greener just because he got the contract in that green, so to speak. With the Eagles, he was a top 5 rushing leader when it was all said and done this past season. And I know it was a weird situation how things transpired and the love for Kenny Gainwell and all that craziness. And I think, if anything, to be clear, with my messaging around the Eagles as somebody that's, very much attuned to the discourse, to the realities of what's going on. With Saquon, the point being earlier, that idea, it's not going to be the Saquon plus a Kenny Gainwell plus a Boston Scott, okay? Like it had been with DeAndre Swift, with the Miles Sanders of the world. I think with Swift, though, he's still getting a great contract. But the situation, nonetheless, I just don't really see. I don't know if I see the high-end type of RB2 fringe RB1 type of production. I just don't see that. Like with the Eagles. Interestingly enough, Marshawn Lloyd, Caleb Williams running back his final year at USC, was compared to DeAndre Swift at the combine. And so they kind of profile in that same mold. And you wonder, the Bears having visions of how to surround Caleb Williams, a back that really kind of synergizes with Caleb Williams' skill set and with what they just want to maybe accomplish or ensure in his first year in the NFL, right? So you still got a Khalil Herbert, a Roshan Johnson, guys that, look, especially now with the new sheriff in town with the Caleb Williams, I mean, things could really change, I think, on a dime with that Chicago situation. So DeAndre Swift, I mean, it really depends. It all comes down to the context of your league, right? And depending on how people are feeling, I mean, if you have a Bears fan, though, that's biased, definitely looking to sell in that sense to capitalize a little bit. And I'm not really looking to, I guess to be clear, I'm not really looking to buy a DeAndre Swift right now, if anything. With Tony Pollard, though, to the Titans, 3 years, $24 million, I'm looking to buy him. Not really. Not really. I mean, I see Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears effectively kind of valued right next to each other now in terms of the initial reaction, the sentiment, which I can understand because it's a little bit of a conundrum. What's going to happen there? Brian Callahan, first-year coach. I've seen people on NFL Network talk about, oh, you look at a Joe Mixon and Chase Evans. Don't really love that for what that might hold in Tennessee, especially a rookie year, Chase Evans, and how minimal he was really used. But I think it's in a situation where, great for Tony Pollard, I'm just kind of looking to take a step back. Take a step back to not, if I have him, cool, hold on to him, not do anything too crazy. I think we know that one of those two guys in a Pollard and Spears, I think could very well take the situation by the horns, so to speak. Man, I gotta get my phrases going. Got the mind juice in here. But Tony Pollard to the Titans, it's an interesting move. It's one that it's just tough to make sense of, I think, right now. It's tough to make sense of. You figure with the contract, he's definitely got the leader in the clubhouse to the opportunity there in Tennessee. But if anything, everybody has a little bit of a blank slate with a new coaching staff. So really an interesting situation to watch develop. But I'm not really looking to make bets either way. If I have them, cool. If anything, with how up and down the running back position, how volatile it can be, right? There's going to be those ebbs and flows, those lows for, I think, a Tony Pollard and a Tajay Spears, I think maybe in the coming months, depending on how the discourse goes either way. So, if anything, when we get more of that reaction, then I'm interested in maybe buying one, selling the other, to be clear. But Aaron Jones to the Vikings, going from Green Bay to Minnesota. Similar to how, look, talking about Green Bay, how I love it for Josh Jacobs. I love the former Green Bay going to Minnesota with Aaron Jones on a 1-year deal, $7 million. Look, I think it's going to be a guy that has, I think, RB1 type of potential, a top 12 type of season. A guy that is up there. Look, he's around 30, okay? A lot of uncertainty, how it looks beyond 2024. But if you can buy him for a mid-second round pick, if you're trying to contend, absolutely can get behind that. And look, if you're not a contender, if you're a rebuilder, I'll sell him for an early second round pick, right? It's a player that I think there's going to be, honestly, a lot of action in terms of trades with him. You think about just players that either are liquid or just liquid in the sense of movable or not movable, right? I think there's going to be a lot of movement with Aaron Jones and people trying to either quote unquote buy or sell. And I think I can understand it. I can honestly understand it. I think it's going to be a very good situation for him in a team that, look, they have a Justin Jefferson, they have a Jordan Addison, they have a TJ Hawkinson, but who's going to really be throwing them the ball? And so I think Aaron Jones, if there's a JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, can be a check down guy. Look, we see the versatility and the use he gets in all senses of the game. And I think it's just a nice trending up for Aaron Jones. I'm looking, you see him, people view him as RB34. I mean, yeah, he's a guy that, look, we get into like the mid rounds of startups. I'm absolutely cool investing a 13th round draft pick, right? So, Aaron Jones, nice situation for him. I think that's just kind of my 2 cents on it. Joe Mixon, basically going to the Texans. I'm looking at it. I'm including although it's a trade, I just think it's obviously, if anything, so important with the running back position to just key in on the context of the trade or of the contract, right? And just what it looks like, right? What their immediate future, short, midterm is. And so with Joe Mixon to the Texans, love that landing spot. The Texans were rumored to be one of the contenders for Saquon. And with a CJ Stroud there, with a Bobby Slowick, who, look, they come from the Kyle Shanahan tree, right? And I'm not saying, I mean, look how successful a guy like CMC can be. And obviously, I'm not comparing that direct at all. I'm just saying the type of emphasis that they do place and the involvement that they do place on the running back position. And just even looking at, team tendencies, the 49ers, obviously rightfully so, with a guy like CMC, they ran the ball the most in the NFL, the tune of 45%. And I'm not saying it's going to be that for Joe Mixon in Houston, but just in terms of the broader identity and the type of role that he can have within that type of Shanahan offense, right? I really like it for Joe Mixon. He's a guy that, look, he's a classic contender running back who you look to target in those 9, 10th rounds in your startups. And I think he's a guy that hasn't really moved maybe either way in terms of the change of scenery to the new team and the overall sentiment. If anything, I like it. I think it's a lot more positive than not for Joe Mixon. And you don't have necessarily a Jamar Chase, a T. Higgins. You do have a couple good receivers, right? But I just think of the identity of what a Bobby Slowick would look to maybe implement and really look to, as teams now see CJ Stroud and what he did and what he's capable of. I think it just really is going to bode well for Joe Mixon and his fantasy upside, the floor as well for 2024. I could see maybe, look, everything goes well. Look, he's still a guy that's not even 28 just yet. So would love to take a bet on him with, a early second round pick. And in terms of if you're a contender or you're looking to acquire some guy, take a swing on him and bet on maybe he even gets a contract next year, right? With the Texans, if all goes well and they're a playoff team and the kind of wheels are spinning, and if CJ Stroud likes him, I mean, look, I think that played a role with Dalton Schultz and his contract, and CJ Stroud was really vocal throughout the occasional interviews throughout the season. So I think really, really great for Joe Mixon going there to Houston. We're just changing tune a little bit now with Austin Eckler going to Washington, the Commanders. Look, there is now no Antonio Gibson, but there's still a Brian Robinson. And I mean, just looking at the contract, even what is he getting paid? AAV, an average of $4 million a year. I mean, it's just talk about a free fall. Austin Eckler, just not great whatsoever. I mean, he's a guy where it falls, it gets to such a point where you're looking at a guy that's barely a top 40 running back in Dynasty, we'll say, in that range, not even a truly solidified RB3 in some sense. I mean, I'll take a swing. I'll take a bet. If you're a contender, I'll throw a late second round pick there. I'll throw a late second, for why not? It's a change of scenery. I think Cliff Kingsbury, it's a new coaching staff too. So it is that kind of blank slate. If anything, it is maybe an advantage for Austin Eckler compared to Brian Robinson. So, I mean, just overall though, it's not looking good. It's not looking great, right? I mean, I don't know why. Look, if you're looking to sell him, what would you even be able to sell him for, right? I mean, it's like if you're a rebuilder, why would you even have him in the first place, right? At this point, and then if you have him already, then assuming you're a contender, you might as well just kind of hold on to him, I think, and we'll see what happens because his value is so suppressed right now. You might as well just try to realize some value and hope for bumps throughout the course of the offseason leading up, and maybe even, and of course, if the possibility in season. If he gets a, if he's got a Jaden Daniels, a Drake May, and he's got a really nice quarterback and a competent offense, maybe he gets, inundated, just dump off after dump off, and has that receiving volume. Very possible. But Zach Moss to the Bengals. Look, sneaky move that expect the unexpected, right? No one really saw it coming. Goes from, he had a great spurt there in Indy and go to the point where he shows out he can be an RB1 for a team. And hence the Bengals move off of a Joe Mixon because they're like, why not? We'll get a guy, or we'll reduce that cap hit for the running back position, where we obviously have to really strengthen the roster as a whole for Joe Burrow, right, to keep us in contention. So we'll pay Zach Moss, a $4 million AAV for 2 years, $8 million total. And look, this is a guy, I feel like I see the memes going around. It's going to be, everybody's favorite sleeper running back, right? But I think there is reasoning behind that in a Cincinnati offense, which, look, we see how great Joe Mixon has performed there. And I don't think there's such a talent gap between those two players. And given the investment, I'm looking at a running back in a good offense, in just a situation that you generally people like, if not love. So Zach Moss, a guy that's 26 years old, so I think that's important to note. If you have him, I think I'm looking to maybe sell high and kind of just wait it out, though. Maybe even let the steam kind of build. Maybe just leading up to the draft, and then if they survive. But if you want to kind of play it a little bit cute, and I know they have Chase Brown there, but given this type of contract, maybe he survives the draft. They don't draft anybody, right? This case, I think it's more likely or it is likely that they don't draft a guy. So just let the narratives build, if anything, with a guy like Zach Moss, and then I think you can really start to sell high before the season, as I think just a general strategy there, and get maybe a decent pick. Look, if you can get it, if you're a rebuilder, you get a second round pick plus a third round pick. Cool. Second round pick plus a random running back body, a younger player like a Chase Brown. I mean, I'd entertain that, honestly. So I think just some really interesting Zach Moss relevance now. And so I think it's interesting to a intriguing time to potentially capitalize on that, honestly. Singletary to the Giants, 3-year deal. Had a good stint there with Houston. I don't know what it's gonna look like, though, with a Daniel Jones, whoever's under center there in New York. Really interesting how that might play out. Look, you have Eric Gray there, Gary Brightwell. I mean, it's not a great situation for Devin Singletary comparatively to the Texans, of course, and just the competency of an offense, right? And then look, can he get the opportunity? Sure, but are you going to bet he's going to be so super efficient behind such a good offensive line or such a, multiple offense? No, you can't really make that bet. So Devin Singletary, I mean, if you can sell for anything right now, I would, a second round pick, I'd look to do that. I mean, I don't know what else needs to really be said for him. He had a nice run, and so if you can capitalize on him, go ahead. Gus Edwards, speaking of which, similar player in that similar kind of boat. Gus Edwards to the Chargers. Now, like this a little bit more because, look, Greg Roman and that Harbaugh connection, Harbaugh to Harbaugh, brother. They know what they're getting. They know what they can bet on, and they know that, look, he could just have that same carved out role in a competent offense, a great quarterback, some weapons, be a goal line vulture, so to speak, and there's value in and of itself. So a really buy cheap guy, although I don't really think you can buy cheap necessarily because people just love that Charger, the appeal of that LA landing spot, right? So I think, look, if you're a contender, I think you're just primed to run it back with him. If you're a rebuilder with him, I think it's a great time to maybe sell high. I really do, because look, we're pre-NFL draft, and I think there's a shot. Look, what if they get a Blake Corum? What if they get, I mean, there's a host of guys that are talented at the position that go in, I think, a mid-late day 2, day 3 for sure. Guys that I think are going to be very much competitors with Gus Edwards. So why not let it kind of build up around the NFL draft, and then just recoup some value for Gus Edwards if you're not in a position to contend. Antonio Gibson of the Patriots. Man, that Patriots, he goes from, it's Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. Now it's Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. Equally, I feel like it's disgusting to try to make sense of. And, it's a 3-year deal, 11 million total. It is what it is. I mean, I think actually on that note, if you have one, why not look to maybe acquire the other, right? And to try to maybe get a little bit of a kind of stranglehold on that room and just see how it develops. Just wait it out. See if one person, rises to the top rather than trying to make a bet right now 50-50, I feel like. So I don't see why anybody would try to, I don't see the market for Antonio Gibson, right, in your league, unless you're diehard Patriot fans, diehard Memphis fans. I don't really see how there's going to be so much volume and trading with Antonio Gibson. So if I have him, I think in pretty much any context, just probably hang on to him for now. And look, they get a quarterback upgrade, assumingly, and they get just an offensive overhaul. I'm just letting that situation play itself out. So, then last but not least, guys, as I was researching for this video, a DJ Dallas to the Cardinals. If anybody, I didn't even know that happened, but DJ Dallas, 3 years, 8.2 in total. The reason I put this is because, look, he's got an insane, I love the kind of headshot. Pretty intense guy. Got to recognize him here. I feel like if I didn't, I don't know, I feel like he'd be angry with me. But I think, look, he's good. This is just a bit of a meme. I think he's there to be a special teamer. Although, look, if James Conner goes down to injury, maybe he's a next-in-line guy. And in an offense with Kyler and then potential Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Trey McBride there. A sneaky guy that, look, he could be that prototypical week 8 of next season. DJ Dallas ends up being RB15 of the week. So, just an interesting guy. But he's a special teamer. Just a guy that got a contract that I think is funny to mention. But with that, guys, if you did enjoy this video, drop a like, subscribe, comment, respond to all the comments. We're building a community. We're building something special here. We got a 1K by draft day sub goal. I know we're a little bit crazy, fanatical about that, but we are approaching this now through draft day. Maniacal urgency, proactivity, like you should be approaching it in your league. So I will see you guys soon in the next video. Have a great one.